Hello and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, Federal Executive Council says petrol supply will normalize by May 2016 and that domestic refineries will begin to operate at full capacity by next year. Senate vows to throw its weight behind the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, as he defends himself before the Code of Conduct Tribunal. Also today, the Senate dropped the amendment of the CCB Act. Aviation unions force Arik Air to shut down domestic operations over alleged 12.5 billion naira debt. And mass murderer Anders Breivik wins part of a human rights case against the Norwegian state.
And in business news tonight, stock market sustains recovery as investors await first quarter earnings from listed equities.
Tonight on sports news, more goals scored on day 2 of the Lagos preliminaries of the Channel's National Kids Cup. Schools continue to fight for a place at the national finals.
The Federal Executive Council today announced that petrol supply is to be available before the end of May 2016, with Port Harcourt and Kaduna refineries supporting supplies. The Minister of Works, Power and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola, who also spoke on power outages, blamed the situation on insufficient gas supply and vandalism of Focado's plants. The Council also declared that all refineries in the country will resume production fully by 2017. Fuel importation will be reduced by 60% by 2018, and that the country will stop petrol importation in 2019. The Council also today sympathized with Nigerians over the long queues, blaming it on sabotage and fuel marketers, whom the Council claims want to make quick money. The Council also directs DPR to enforce correct pump prices, promising that 1,200 trucks of PMS will be delivered daily to end the scarcity.
Occupy the minds of the President and the Cabinet as they converge on the Council chambers for yet another Federal Executive Council meeting, include the 2016 budget that is yet to be assented to, the epileptic power supply in the country, the long petrol queues that have refused to disappear at petrol stations, and criticisms that have continued to trail the China trip and its gains for Nigeria. The 2016 budget may have been passed by the National Assembly, but the executive arm of government is still holding on to it. Budget Minister explains.
On the 2016 budget, we're still talking. On the 2017 budget, I think the idea is to get it to the National Assembly in time so that they can pass it this year. In addition, the monitoring in the expectation that we will soon have a budget, the monitoring and evaluation mechanism to make sure that the budget delivers what it promises. That mechanism was looked at by the Federal Executive Council and approved.
The administration has given 10,000 megawatts target of power by 2019. When critics say it cannot safeguard the 5,000 megawatts available. Minister of Power explains.
Essentially, it's a gas supply issue arising from the problems that is now well reported of the failure of our operational platforms at Focados, where repairs are going on to restore the gas line, the crude line, and consequently the gas lines. Because of that, our power production has dropped from 5,000 megawatt to about 3,000, 3,001, 3,002, depending on other collateral problems. And therefore, what was not enough at 5,000 has become even more difficult to share at 3,000. Whilst we understand that people are going through a difficult time, it's a bad time to have an energy crisis, and there's no good time to have one. But we are optimistic as we brief Council that we will turn this curve. It's a temporary thing, and we will overcome it. We will go back to normal service when gas is fully restored.
The federal government still owes Nigerians some more explanations on why the queues have refused to disappear at petrol stations, even after promises to flood the market with the product in a few weeks' time.
I've asked DPR almost immediately to deploy. We're going to be doing a lot of deployments in DPR to make sure that these prices are enforced and that depot owners sell at the right price, because only through that price stabilization will you avoid the sort of systemic cues that you're seeing happen. But good news, we're working as hard as we can. As of today, we're delivering about 1,200 trucks, just 30 to 40 short of what we need to. By weekend, we should be delivering literally the same number of trucks. It will take a bit of days to even out, but yeah, I'm sure you can see a lot of improvements already all over the country.
Council asked the Ministry of Justice to domesticate the International Communications Union ITU treaty following the emergence of a Nigerian as the new chairman, insisting that Nigeria stands to benefit in the area of security, the fight against corruption and economic development following President Buhari's recent trip to China. Chukuma Onwekusi, Channels Television News.
The Senate has resolved to suspend discussions and considerations of the amendment of the CCB Act. Nigeria's upper legislative chamber also resolved to support the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, in his ongoing trial until proven guilty. The Senate says all members have resolved to be united and put all the crises recorded since the inception of the 8th Senate behind them. According to the lawmakers, all senators that have cases in court have been advised and encouraged to withdraw them.
The Senate, in a closed-door session, discussed a number of issues affecting the smooth working of the Senate. And I'm happy to announce to our colleagues and the entire nation that after exhaustive deliberations and being sincere to ourselves, we decided to put behind us all things that have divided us since the inception of the 8th Senate and work as a united Senate in the best interest of our country. We also agreed in a closed session to suspend the discussion of the Committee on Ethics report on Senator Marafa. We agreed to suspend further deliberation on the amendment of the Code of Conduct Bureau and Tribunals Act and the Criminal Administration of Justice Act, the amendment thereto. We agreed that this Senate should stand, and we do stand by the Senate President in his trial until proven guilty by the court in accordance with our Constitution and democratic practices all over the world, including South Africa, Brazil, and Russia. We also agreed to set up, and we hereby set up, a committee, 2 from each geopolitical zone, to address all remaining issues. And as part of the reconciliation, those in court should consider withdrawing the cases.
The prosecution witness and an investigator with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Mr. Michael Wekpas, has told the Code of Conduct Tribunal that the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, was not investigated over false declaration of assets by the anti-graft agency before bringing him for trial at the tribunal. Mr. Wekpas told the tribunal that Dr. Saraki was only investigated for money laundering. Our correspondent Amaka Ukafo reports.
Solidarity by lawmakers for the Senate President continued at the Code of Conduct Tribunal. Even though the senators do not come together to the tribunal, they come individually during proceedings. At the resumed hearing of the case, the cross-examination of the Chief Prosecution Witness, Mr. Michael Wekpas, was centered on Count 11 of the 13-count charges brought against the Senate President, which bordered on foreign accounts allegedly owned by the Senate President when he was Governor of Kwara State. The Chief Prosecution Witness said that although he led the team that investigated the Senate President, he never invited him for interrogation or obtained a statement from him. He also told the tribunal that the charges does not border on asset declaration but on money laundering. Responding to questions on the alleged transfer of funds to foreign accounts owned by Saraki, the witness said some documents and telex related to the transfer of funds from a commercial bank account operated by the Senate President to a foreign account were burnt. He He said the bank deposed to an affidavit and obtained a police report to prove that there was a fire incident that burnt the bank's documents, and that he believed that part of the documents burnt were those that relate to the transfer of money to a foreign account by the Senate President. When asked which bank issued the foreign account to the defendant, he identified it as American Express Bank, New York. He, however, said he did not find out the country of incorporation, but he knew that the bank existed through open source information. When asked further, the witness said the name of the beneficiary bank in the document he submitted to the tribunal was Standard Chartered Bank, New York, and not American Express Bank, New York, as earlier testified as the beneficiary. He was, however, quick to inform the tribunal that the two banks are agents, but when asked to show from the face of the document where it was written that the banks were agents, the witness said he could not find such. Asked whether he investigated the American Express Bank, New York, in the course of his investigation, Bedcast responded that he only investigated a card account, but that he believed that there exists a bank called the American Express Bank. He said it will require a lot of diplomatic work to ascertain if the said bank exists and if it indeed issued a card to the Senate President. While the defense expressed satisfaction with the trend of its cross-examination, the prosecutor declined to comment on the day's proceedings.
Essentially, the cross-examination of the witness focused on count 11, primarily. And we haven't exactly finished yet, but I think it is okay.
Cross-examination of the witness is expected to continue at the next proceeding. Amaka Okafor, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, has asked the chairman of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, Mr. Danladi Umar, to disqualify himself from the case. Dr. Saraki is accusing the chairman of bias and insists that he cannot get justice under his chairmanship. In the motion of notice filed by Dr. Saraki, it was contended that the continued presence of Mr. Umar on the panel of tribunal offends the provisions of Section 36, subsection 1 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The applicant claims that the unfolding events and the way and manner his trial is being conducted by Mr. Umar suggests there is likelihood of bias from the chairman. No date has been fixed for hearing on the motion. In part 2, after the break, Nigerian army alleges that Boko Haram is giving out loans to woo recruits into the sect. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.